You can't make up to 6 movies in a franchise without a few mistakes here and there. Even masterpieces like Despicable Me and Minions aren't flawless. And we've got 25 dumb mistakes to look at. From an artistic error on a building, to a mistake that's dumb enough to fire animators, and an error with the Minions body that set up the franchise for success. Welcome to Minionaire, the home of all things Minions. I don't know why you're waiting for me to tell you to hit the subscribe button, but just do it right now so you don't miss out on anything about your favorite little yellow henchman. We're going to start off with a mistake that's as American as it gets. Have you ever noticed that something looked a little American in the middle of London? It happened so quickly that most viewers never catch it. When Bob enjoys his royal bath, he happily hugs 2 bright yellow fire hydrants that look just like the classic American ones. Later, after Kevin grows into a giant and runs across the city to save Stuart and Bob from Scarlet Overkill, he even screws a bright red American-style hydrant back into the ground. Now here's the problem. The movie is set in London in 1968, but British fire hydrants don't normally look like the large above-ground ones in the US. In the UK, they are usually hidden underground with small marker signs showing where they are. That means both hydrants stand out a lot more than they should. It's a tiny background detail, but once you know the difference between British and American hydrants, it's surprisingly difficult to ignore. It's the kind of mistake that's easy to overlook unless you're the type of person who pays attention to the little things happening in the background. Unless London secretly imported American hydrants just for the movie, this looks like a funny background mistake that slipped into the movie. Gru's secret lair seems to renovate itself without anyone lifting a finger. Earlier in the movie, his underground hideout is pretty basic. There's a ladder leading down and a few computers scattered around the room. It feels more like a kid's secret base than the headquarters of a future supervillain. But later, when we return to the same lair, the entire setup suddenly looks much more advanced. The ladder has vanished, and the room is now packed with larger, fancier computer machines taking up the space. The whole place looks like it received a major upgrade overnight. There's no scene showing Gru building new machines or expanding the lair. The movie simply cuts back and expects everything to look the same, even though it clearly doesn't. Did Gru secretly renovate his lair off-screen, or did the animators redesign the room between scenes? Either way, it's a small continuity change that's easy to miss unless you're really paying close attention. Keep your eyes on the table in this scene before Gru's interview with the Vicious Six. At first, the table in the waiting room was completely empty. There's no magazine, no newspaper, nothing at all. Gru sits there surrounded by intimidating villains, and throughout those shots, the table stays clear the entire time. But moments later, after Gru gets up, a magazine suddenly appears on the same table without anyone seen placing it there. No one walks over with it, no receptionist sets it down, and nobody else in the waiting room even goes near the table. It simply appears between camera cuts as if it had been there the whole time. It's a tiny continuity slip that lasts only a few seconds, which is probably why most viewers never notice it. But once you rewind the scene and compare both shots, the magazine's sudden appearance becomes undeniably obvious. When Gru auditions to join the Vicious Six, they laugh at him for being just a kid. They tell him evil is for adults who steal powerful objects and cause chaos, not for little kids who should be in school. From their perspective, Gru simply hasn't done anything big enough to deserve a place among the world's greatest villains. But here's the strange part. Young Gru had once helped steal the Queen of England's crown from Scarlet Overkill in the previous Minions movie. That's exactly the kind of impressive crime the Vicious Six were talking about. If anything, it should have been the perfect example for him to prove he wasn't just some ordinary kid with big dreams. Instead, Gru never mentions it. He doesn't bring up the crown, Scarlet Overkill, or the fact that he already pulled off one of the biggest heists in the franchise. Maybe he wanted to stay humble, or maybe the writers simply overlooked one of his biggest achievements. Either way, it feels like the perfect comeback that somehow never happened. Nunchucks are supposed to have 2 sticks connected by a chain, so where did the other 2 come from? As the vicious six chase Gru for stealing the Zodiac Stone, the nun throws a pair of nunchucks toward Gru and his minions. But if you watch closely, the spinning nunchucks briefly appear to have 4 sticks instead of 2. For a split second, it almost looks like she's throwing a completely different weapon instead of a regular pair of nunchucks. At first, you might assume it's just your eyes playing tricks on you. After all, fast-moving objects in animated movies can somehow blur together, making them look a little distorted. But that's what makes this scene so interesting. Normally, you'd probably dismiss it as a motion blur, but the scene is shown in slow motion, making the extra handles much easier to spot. Since everything is moving at reduced speed, it's much harder to blame it on how fast the nunchucks are spinning. Whether it was a single animation frame that slipped through production or just a strange visual illusion, it's one of those tiny details that almost no one notices except you're incredibly observant. Well, now you definitely can't unsee it. Background characters usually blend into the scene, but this one accidentally stands out. As Otto walks through the neighborhood carrying the Zodiac Stone, a group of children can be seen playing in the background. One little girl wearing a yellow outfit is clearly shown with a darker skin tone. Just a few moments later, without changing clothes or leaving the scene, she suddenly appears with a much lighter skin tone. What's strange is that nothing else about the shot changes. She's still in the same area, wearing the same outfit, and the lighting doesn't change enough to explain such a dramatic difference. It almost looks like an entirely different character briefly replaced her between cuts. It's such a quick animation inconsistency that most viewers never notice. You're gonna have to keep your eyes on the sky during this scene. As Otto is launched high into the air, the sky looks completely clear. There's no bird, no duck, and nothing flying nearby. Then, almost instantly, a duck suddenly appears at just the right moment, getting its neck right in the cord attached to the Zodiac Stone. The funny part is how perfectly timed it is. There's no sign the duck was flying in from a distance. One moment the sky is empty, and the next it's right there, exactly where the story needs it to be. It happens so fast that most viewers never question it. The duck looks sort of familiar, doesn't it? That's because it's the duck from Illumination's other movie, Migration. These dudes are really out here trying to start a shared cinematic universe. Apparently, in the Minions world, playground slides work much better than washing machines. After falling face flat into a muddy puddle, Otto is completely covered in dirt. Seconds later, he slides down a playground slide and gets launched into the air. But here's the weird part. When he's shown flying in the air, every bit of mud has disappeared. His overalls are spotless, his body is sparkly clean, and it's like he never fell into the puddle at all. Maybe that slide comes with a magical cleaning service. Here's a tiny background detail that's incredibly easy to miss. When Otto first falls into the mud, the lighting is bright and even. The ground doesn't have any large shadows crossing it, making the area look open and well lit. But only a few moments later, a huge tree shadow suddenly stretches across the exact same spot. The odd part is that the environment hasn't really changed. There isn't any noticeable shift in the sun or the angle that would explain where the large shadow came from, unless a giant tree grows out of nowhere in a matter of seconds. This looks like another continuity slip hidden in the background. Wild Knuckles has plenty of talents, but growing extra hands definitely isn't one of them. When a group of thugs confronts him over unpaid debts, he wastes no time jumping into a fight. The punches fly so fast, it's almost impossible to keep track of everything happening on screen. One second he's dodging attacks, the next he's throwing punches in every direction, creating one of the fastest action scenes in the movie. But if you pause at just the right moment, the animation does something really strange. For a split second, Wild Knuckles appears to have 5 visible hands at once. 2 are grabbing the big guy's arms, 1 is slapping him across the face, another seems to be picking his nose, and somehow there's still 1 more hand visible. At full speed, your brain barely registers it because the scene moves by in the blink of an eye. But pause at just the right frame, and the extra limbs become surprisingly clear. It almost looks like several animation frames were blended together to exaggerate how fast he was moving. The effect definitely makes the fight feel more frantic and over the top, which was probably the intention. But if you happen to pause at the wrong, or rather the right moment, it stops looking like an action scene and starts looking like Wild Knuckles unlocked a secret superpower no one ever talks about. If you've ever covered your walls with posters of your favorite celebrities, you'll understand why this mistake feels so odd. When Bob walks into Gru's room after having a nightmare, a poster of the Vicious Six hangs proudly above Gru's bed. It makes perfect sense because Gru idolizes them and dreams of becoming one of the world's greatest villains. It's exactly the kind of poster you'd expect a young, aspiring supervillain to have on his wall. But just a few seconds later, the poster mysteriously disappears without anyone touching it. Kevin and Stuart enter the room shortly after, and it's still missing. No ripped paper, no fallen poster, and no sign that it was ever there in the first place. The room itself barely changes, which makes the missing poster stand out even more. Everything else around Gru's bed stays in place, yet one of the biggest decorations on the wall somehow vanishes as if it was never hanging there at all. Did Gru suddenly stop being a fan? Or did the poster simply vanish due to a small continuity error? Either way, once you notice it, you can't help wondering where it went. Here's a question that's surprisingly hard to answer. How exactly do minions breathe? During Scarlet Overkill's attack, Bob and Stuart have their mouths completely covered with tape. Normally, that should make breathing pretty difficult for them, especially since minions don't even have noses. But instead of panicking or struggling for air, they act as if nothing happened at all. The movie never hints at them running out of air. In fact, the minions simply carry on as if having their only visible airway sealed isn't a problem. There's no panic, no sign of discomfort, and no attempt to remove the tape because they can't breathe. If humans were in the same situation, we'd be desperate to get the tape off almost immediately. But for these little yellow guys, it seems to make the slightest difference. Maybe minions breathe through tiny openings we never see, or maybe they simply don't need oxygen the same way humans do. Whatever the explanation is, the movie never tells us, making this one of those hilarious little logic mysteries that are impossible to ignore once you think about it. When you consider the fact that the initial character designs of these guys actually had them featured with a nose, it makes it really hard to look at them differently. The scriptwriters were actually writing scenes and stories thinking that these dudes had noses, but the animators had other plans. Do you think the minions look better without a nose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Even background characters aren't safe from continuity mistakes. As Gru waits for his interview with the Vicious Six, several intimidating villains are sitting in the waiting room. One of them wears a large apron and holds a big butcher knife, making him hard to miss. At first, nothing seems unusual, but if you take a moment to compare two shots from the same scene, you'll notice the apron changes position. In one shot, it sits high on his chest, and in the next, it hangs much lower and even looks a bit wider, as if someone adjusted it between camera angles. What's strange is that the character never touches the apron or moves enough for it to shift that much. He stays seated the whole time, yet his outfit somehow changes all on its own. It's a tiny wardrobe inconsistency that most viewers would never spot during normal viewing. But once you compare the shots side by side, the difference is pretty hard to ignore. The minions have plenty of unusual abilities, but teleportation definitely isn't one of them. During one of Gru's lair speeches, keep an eye on the minion covered in green paint. At first, he's standing directly behind Gru, listening along with the rest of the crowd. Moments later, he suddenly appears on the other side of the room without the movie showing him move. But it doesn't just stop there. In the next shots, he somehow pops back behind Gru before appearing behind Otto instead. The camera never shows him weaving through the crowd, and there simply isn't enough time for him to move that far. It's almost as if he keeps changing positions every time the camera angle changes. This is likely just a small continuity slip, but it creates the hilarious illusion that this particular minion secretly unlocked teleportation. It's one of those blinking you miss it scenes, but once you notice him jumping around the room, it's surprisingly hard to focus on anything else. Here's a question that gets stranger the more you think about it. At the beginning of Minions, we're shown the origin story of our yellow friends. Before they could walk, talk, or wear goggles, they lived as tiny single-celled organisms underwater before evolving into the lovable, chaotic helpers we know today. The movie even spends time showing their evolution over millions of years. So, based on that, you'd expect breathing underwater to be one of their natural abilities. After all, the ocean was literally their first home. Later in the movie, while riding with the Nelson family to VillainCon, Kevin becomes interested in the supervillain Frankie Fishlips. Tina jokes that Frankie couldn't possibly be their boss and asks if the minions can even breathe underwater. Surprisingly, Kevin gives no clear answer at all. He doesn't nod, deny it, or even react in a way that clears things up. The conversation simply moves on, leaving the question hanging. Considering where the minions originally came from, shouldn't swimming and breathing underwater be second nature to them? Or did they somehow lose that ability over millions of years? The movie never explains it, leaving us with another fun little mystery. License plates are supposed to identify one specific vehicle. So how did two completely different cars end up with the same one? As Kevin, Stuart, and Bob search for a ride to VillainCon, a colorful hippie van drives past with the plate number D6413. At first, nothing seems unusual. It's just another vehicle passing by on the road. But only a few minutes later, an elderly woman drives by in a completely different green car, carrying the exact same plate number. Unless these two drivers secretly agreed to share a license plate, it looks like the number was accidentally reused during production. It's the kind of tiny background detail that flashes by in just a second or two, making it incredibly easy to miss unless you pause and compare both scenes side by side. The minions may all look alike, but one thing that's easy to recognize is their signature goggles. While Kevin, Stuart, and Bob travel to New York to find a new boss, their goggles have a golden color that matches the lighting throughout the journey. The warm tint is visible in multiple shots as they continue their adventure. But when they finally step off the boat in New York, their goggles suddenly appear silver instead. Nothing happens to them on the trip, and there's no scene showing them changing or replacing the goggles. Now, this could simply be a tiny animation oversight, or maybe the artist adjusted the color during production. Either way, it's a subtle visual inconsistency that's easy to miss because everyone's busy watching the minions' adventure instead of staring at their goggles. Bob never goes anywhere without his beloved teddy bear. Before climbing into the Nelson family's car, he carries his teddy inside a bright red and yellow box. He carefully sets it down, picks up his teddy, and climbs into the car. But just a few seconds later, something odd happens. The box has completely disappeared. One moment it's sitting pretty on the road, and the next it's gone. It doesn't go into the car, and nobody picks it up, kicks it aside, or carries it away. Maybe another sneaky minion grabbed it off screen, or maybe it simply just vanished between cuts. Here's one almost nobody notices. As the Nelson family's mom offers the minions apple slices during their road trip, she's holding a kitchen knife. In the first shot, the handle has a noticeable upward curve. Then the camera changes angle, and suddenly the handle curves downward instead, making it look like an entirely different knife. It happens so quickly that your eyes are focused on the characters rather than the knife itself. That's probably why this subtle prop inconsistency slipped under the radar. But once you compare both shots, it's hard to look at the knife the same way again. Sometimes the biggest movie mistakes have nothing to do with animation. They're hidden in history. When the Nelson family's car arrives at VillainCon, a personalized license plate is displayed. It looks perfectly normal today, so it's easy to ignore. In fact, unless you're familiar with the history of license plates, you'd probably never question it. There's just one problem. Minions takes place in 1968, but personalized license plates weren't introduced in New York until years later. That means the customized plate shown on the Nelson's car technically shouldn't exist yet. It's a small historical slip that blends so naturally into the scene that most viewers would never think to fact check it. This might be one of the biggest continuity questions in the entire Minions franchise. In Minions: The Rise of Gru, we're shown what appears to be Gru's first meeting with Dr. Nefario inside the record shop. Dr. Nefario introduces himself and even gives Gru one of his early villain gadgets, making it seem like this is the very beginning of their partnership. But if you remember the first Minions movie, that timeline doesn't quite add up. At VillainCon, Gru meets Dr. Nefario while watching a demonstration of his freeze ray. He later uses that very gadget to steal Queen Elizabeth's crown from Scarlet Overkill. Judging by the scene, it feels like they're meeting for the first time there as well, making both movies present different versions of how their relationship began. So, which movie shows their actual first meeting? Did they already know each other before the record shop scene, or did the timeline get a little mixed up? Either way, it's one of the franchise's most interesting continuity questions, and one that's absolutely hard to explain. Getting into VillainCon isn't easy. Every visitor has to prove their villain material before they're allowed inside. When it's Bob's turn, he gives his innocent Teddy a creepy makeover using paper and duct tape. It's a funny moment until you rewind. Just seconds earlier, the table in front of the security agent didn't have a roll of duct tape in sight. The table looks completely clear. Then, right when Bob needs it, a roll of duct tape suddenly appears as if it had been there all along. Nobody places it there. The security agent doesn't hand it to him, and the camera doesn't show where it came from. It simply pops into existence, making the whole moment feel like a tiny magic trick. Maybe VillainCon has self-restocking office supplies. Or maybe the animators hoped we'd be too busy laughing at Bob's teddy bear to notice. Scarlet Overkill certainly has a unique way of telling bedtime stories. In her dramatic version of the Three Little Pigs, Stuart ends up with 6 arrows sticking out of his body. Somehow, he isn't screaming, running around in panic, or even looking uncomfortable. He's perfectly fine, acting as if having half a dozen arrows is just another normal day for a minion. But then, something even stranger happens. Only a couple of seconds later, every single arrow on his body disappears. They don't fall out, no one pulls them out, and Stuart never removes them himself. So where did all 6 arrows go? The movie never shows us. We all know the weather can change quickly, but this quickly? As Kevin, Stuart, and Bob decide to apologize to Scarlet Overkill, London is bright and sunny. The sky is clear, sunlight casts a warm glow on the buildings, and soft shadows stretch across the ground. Everything looks like a perfect afternoon, with nothing suggesting a storm is on the way. Then, almost instantly, the entire atmosphere turns dark. And that's not even the strangest part. Moments later, rain starts pouring as if an entirely different day has begun. There's barely any transition between the sunshine and the storm, making the sudden shift feel almost unnatural. Normally, weather changes like this take time, but here, it happens in the blink of an eye. Unless a supervillain secretly invented an instant weather machine, this looks like another sneaky continuity mistake hiding between scenes. By the end of Minions, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob are rewarded by the Queen of England for their bravery. Naturally, Stuart celebrates in the most Stuart way possible, by smashing his guitar into pieces. The broken wood scatters across the floor, leaving quite a mess in front of everyone. But keep your eyes on the ground. Moments later, as Kevin steps forward to receive his reward, every piece of the smashed guitar has vanished. The floor is suddenly spotless, even though there wasn't enough time for anyone to clean it up. Nobody walks in to sweep the pieces away. The movie never shows anyone picking them up. They mysteriously disappear between shots without any explanation. Maybe Buckingham Palace has the fastest invisible cleaning crew in movie history. Or maybe the Queen keeps a few magical royal janitors on standby. There you have it, the dumbest mistakes ever in the Minion movies. Which mistake do you feel showed how sloppy the animators were? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our other videos.